Hey everyone, this is Coach Phoenix.
And I'm Coach Gina.
And this is Toast with the Coaches. Cheers.
Cheers. Hi everyone, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of Perspective, the show where we drink, talk about life, the universe, and all that other jazz.
And again, I'm Coach Phoenix, founder and CEO of Role Model Life Coaching. At Role Model Life Coaching, we partner with our clients to help them navigate down the road of life towards their model self.
Phoenix is awesome, everybody. I definitely recommend him.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
And again, I am Coach Gina. I'm a certified life coach and founder of Clear Focus Coaching, where we specialize in boundaries coaching and women empowerment. To find out more, check out clearfocuscoaching.com.
Link below. Check it out. Now, at this time, raise your glasses with me. I'd like to raise a toast. I would like to raise a toast for a woman that truly understands the importance of education, because education saved her life. This same woman now dedicates her own life to save other children just like her through education. She's more than a pretty face, an educator, Brooklyn's own Star Jones, and I'm not talking about the rapper. Cheers.
Cheers. Or maybe you are talking about the rapper. We don't know. Maybe you do both.
I mean, she do have that celebrity face. Star, what's going on, love? How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing all right.
We're doing very well. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're excited as well, especially you coming from my hometown, Brooklyn, New York. So let's
is Queens. Really is Queens.
Oh, I said Brooklyn. Yeah, let me correct that. My fault. We got to give Q you some love.
Yes.
Queens. So, all right. So, it's still my hometown, New York City. Let's get right into it. Who was Star, and who? Explain to the audience who was Star growing up.
So that's interesting. No one's never asked me that question directly, who is Star. So I'm excited to explore this. Yeah. If I had to say who I am, or once in college, we had to choose a term that represents us or our journey. And I believe the term, this was in undergrad, so it was some time ago, but I believe that the term, and you have to choose a word that starts with an S, with the same letter of as your name. I love that exercise. And the word that I chose was striving. So striving, Starasia. Mm-hmm. And because I looked up words and I tried to figure out what really could fit. And I said striving because being in undergrad and it being one of my capstone courses, I was kind of at the end of the road. And I chose striving because I never imagined going to college. So striving represents perseverance for me and continuing to work towards your goals and overcoming obstacles. Mm-hmm. So tying that into who I am, or a little bit about my journey, I am a teacher. I teach English, middle school. So my area of expertise, or my focus, my degree is English education, grades 7 through 12. Okay. But I definitely never imagined being a teacher because I didn't like school. Or not that I didn't like it. Both of my parents were relatively young, and I have 8 siblings. I'm a twin. Yes, I have a twin brother. So whenever I mention me, I always got to throw him in there.
I love that. It's you're part of each other forever.
Yeah, yes, I feel that that's definitely true. The twin thing, it's exciting. And it's 8 of us all together, and education wasn't really a super priority in my household. I don't want to say it's because my parents didn't care, but when you have 8 kids, you're financially stressed. There's other priorities that you have to focus on. And so my parents—
Can I ask, when you say that education wasn't a priority, how did that manifest? How do you know that it wasn't a priority? What did that look like?
That's a great question. I feel like when I say that it wasn't a priority, I don't want to say that my parents didn't care, but me being an educator myself, I feel like when I think of the word priority, right, words that are synonyms that we could use for the word priority would be like responsibility. And when something's a responsibility and a priority, you make sure that it's at the center of your parenting, or like it's your parents would make sure that you know that it's your responsibility to, make education your number one focus.
Like a focal point.
Yes. And that was definitely not the case in my household. My mom did not finish high school because, as I mentioned, she was a teen mom, and there's 8 of us, and we're only a year. Each of us were like a year apart.
Wow.
So we were kind of growing up.
And where do you fall within the bunch?
I am number 4.
Okay.
So
wait, hold on. So your brother being number 3 or your brother being number 5?
Oh, he's number 5. I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's number 5. And I think that, especially now that I'm older and I'm an educator myself, perhaps maybe I shouldn't say that education wasn't a priority. It could have been that life responsibilities in terms of having like financial stresses. And if you have multiple kids, that's a lot of different personalities, and trying to make sure that they don't fall victim to the same circumstances you did. It can be overwhelming and challenging. So I think that's what contributed to education taking a back seat to the other like child rearing responsibilities, I would say.
Gotcha. What type of student were you?
I was not a good student at all. I was the first time that I was held over a few times, so twice.
A few times? Oh, a couple of times.
Yeah, two.
Wow. Was that because you wasn't going to school, or is it because you just wasn't like interested?
The first time I was only in first grade, so I'm not really. I feel like that time was a bit of a fog. And then the second time I was in 6th grade, so I remember that really vividly, very clear. I think that what it taught me in terms of the second time that I was held over in 6th grade, the first time that I got held over, my brother and I was left back together. And during those times, and I'm speaking from like experience and then being an educator myself, during those times, if there were twins, because there were a couple of quick twins that were in my school when I was in 1st grade, and there were, I want to say, about 3 sets that we all had to remain in the 1st grade. So I think what happened was they wouldn't push one forward and leave one, like they would leave you back together.
It was like a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
Y'all both make it or y'all both gonna stay.
Yeah. So for example, there were these 2 twins, Michael and Melissa, that was similar to me and my brother, and Taniqua and Shantia. The names I remember because I remember we all were held over. And but when I got to 6th grade, I was held over alone, not with my twin, because in 6th grade you had to take state tests. So, but I remember I took a math test in summer school, and I remember coming home, and my twin was so excited that he passed, and he was like jumping down, like yes, and it was just like, you're not my real twin anymore.
Betrayal.
Yes, I had a brother that was a year younger than me, and I'm like, I'm just gonna say he's my twin. But I remember going to tell my mom that I failed the test and that, I would have to repeat the 6th grade. And I remember sitting on the stoop, and it was August, and it was cloudy outside. And my mom had called, was conferencing with the school, trying to see if there was anything that she could do, if anything could be done, because this was the second time that I would now be held over. And when I heard her disappointment on the phone when it was clear that the school was not going to change their mind. And I remember sitting on the steps just thinking to myself, like, okay, well, and I had to be 12 years old, maybe 12. I remember thinking to myself that, I've always been very spiritual in terms of I've always had like a relationship with God. And I remember thinking to myself, well, God makes some people maybe God makes some people pretty, or maybe God makes some people smart. Maybe God just didn't make me smart. And in that moment, I spoke such negativity, but in that moment, I realized that I wasn't going to be anything. I just knew school and education just wasn't my niche. It wasn't my thing. And I even remember when I had to report to back to school in September after failing. And I was a little bit of I don't want to say a popular kid, but because I had so many siblings, we were like well known in the neighborhood. And I remember seeing my friends and them asking me, like me and my twin brother, we went into the school building, and this was going to be the first time that we had to go separately, because if you were in 6th grade, you go to the lunchroom. If you're in 7th grade, you go to the auditorium. And we've never had to, on first days of school, do like that.
Yeah.
And I remember when it was time for us to do like that, I felt so much like I felt hot. Now that I'm older, I realized that it was anxiety. And I remember spending the entire day in the class, in the bathroom, because I couldn't bring myself to, I knew everyone would see, and I was so embarrassed. And then I remember years later going to high school, my first day of high school, and I'm on the bus, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not really going here, because who wants to graduate in 2010? I'm not going to show my kids this degree. They're going to know I'm dumb. Not gonna, like all of these crazy thoughts. Like I never had intentions on graduating high school. So I never really went, because I wasn't with kids that were my age.
Did you talk to anybody, or did you have anybody to talk to about those anxieties or those concerns at the time? Or were those thoughts that you just kind of kept inside and kind of felt normal?
I think that I probably just kept those thoughts inside, or like I had one teacher, she was like the dean of my school. Her name was Malaysia. I'll leave out the last name. And she was so pretty and so sweet. And because I was performing poorly academically, in addition to me having to have like a funny personality, I also had to be like incredibly tough, because if you are held over a significant amount of times, people will bully you and call you names. So I had to be a little bit tougher than I would have liked to be sometimes. And when you are not performing in schools, which is something that they still do now, they put you in lower performing classrooms. So then you're with the kids that are, bad like you, or even better than you. And I would always get into I would have fights, and they would suspend me for extensive periods of time. For example, this was the same school that I had been held over in. Once I got suspended from school I want to say I got suspended in February, and then they allowed me to come back by about March, April. And then in April, they suspended me again, and I was not allowed to return. And they're called superintendent suspensions. We don't manage, in terms of behavior management, we don't use that today. But back then, in those times, that was what they did. And as I mentioned, I feel like because my mom was a young parent with multiple children, yes, she did try to advocate for us, but I think that knowing what I know now, if I was in her shoes, I would have been a bit more vocal in terms of, it's no way that my kid is going to be able to learn. You're not bridging learning gaps when you're suspending her for this, excessive amount of time. So I feel like in that school, I had, I definitely got labeled, and I was really written off. Like I would have teachers who didn't really want me to come in their class, or be like, Miss Jones, you're aiming for a third time.
Oh, wow. So teachers will like contribute to that the bullying.
Now that I would say so now. Yeah, I would say so. Some of them, not all of them, but like Miss Walker, who no matter what I did, she just loved me. Like, I don't know why she did. And then I also had a dean who was Miss Bolden in the same school, who was incredibly supportive. Two deans would pay me to come to like Saturday tutoring. Like, if you come to tutoring, I'll buy you breakfast. And it's like, sure you want me breakfast? Anything I want? And so I definitely had, I want to say about three teachers who really wanted to see me do well in that middle school. And actually, when I ended up graduating high school, one of my deans actually came down to New York to see me walk. And I have relationships with Miss Walker and Miss Bolden now.
Oh, wow.
Oddly enough, I ended up interning at that same school and encountering some of those teachers who wrote me off. And it was important for me to intern there for when I was getting my degree, because I wanted them to see that, you never know how a child is going to turn out. But
so hold on. Let's go to that point. What was that turning point to make you say, you know what, I'm not this girl that can't do it. I can do it. And what drove you to graduate from high school?
What drove me to that was, I remember I had to be about 17, I want to say I had a teacher in my freshman year. So I was 16 in my freshman year. Whoa. And I remember this teacher, Miss Porter, she gave me this book, and the book was Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, I believe it was. And there was a poem in there, and the poem was titled Statistic. And there was a bunch of poems and short stories, and I would read it. But it wasn't until I became a little bit older. I was about 17. And around the same time that the teacher had gave me the book, when I was 16, my brother had a best friend, Lamar, who committed suicide, unfortunately. And I had this incredible crush on Lamar. I just knew we were going to be a match made in heaven. It never happened. And I thought that he was so intelligent and smart, and I saw all of these great things I thought of him. Unfortunately, clearly it wasn't something that he maybe felt about himself, because he ended up taking his life when he turned 18. And I remember, I feel like sometimes God allows you to see other people's mistakes or learn from other people's experience. So Lamar passed on, and that made me really sad. But it also, in all that tragedy, the blessing that I found was, once I realized the big mistake that I made in terms of my education, and I really realized when I'm 16, 17, that I was really not going to be anything, and I really didn't know what to do, I became incredibly sad and depressed to where I didn't even want to be here. But because I remember the impact of what, Lamar taking his life and how that affected my brother and how it affected me, it made me realize, okay, maybe that's not something, even though I don't want to be here, I have a twin, I love him. Would I want him to be sad? Would I want, you know what I mean? And so I would read the statistic poem every day, read the chicken soup books, and I started journaling because I was so sad. Every day I would journal. And then eventually I'm looking at the journal, and I realized that all of the things that was making me so depressed, I was failing in school. I didn't have friends because I wasn't in school with, those students were significantly younger than me. So I didn't want to be friends with them. Yeah. And I didn't really go to school, to be honest, because go for what? I went sometimes, but I didn't, once you fall behind, it's very hard to catch up. And then I also, to be honest, I also felt okay, remember taking it back to my initial point of God makes some people pretty and God makes some people smart. I truly felt okay, academics isn't my, school isn't for me. I'm not a scholar. So maybe I could just be a gold digger or something, which is horrible to say, but maybe I can use my looks and I'll just meet a guy or.
How old were you when you had that thought in your mind, I could just be a gold digger, except for through the school?
Or maybe not necessarily a gold digger, but at the time that was the term that was like
a housewife. I could have somebody take care of me.
Yes, that would.
I understand what you meant. Yeah.
That's what I mean, a housewife. I don't have to have brains. I could just use, my looks and beauty or something. I want to say that this is such a cliche, but when you turn 15, that's when you start coming into, your body starts forming and you start getting attention from guys, and it's I think I got it. This is it. So
it feels a lot better than school, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So what was the turning point that made you be I don't really want to be the housewife. I'm gonna try this education thing. Okay,
so I was always incredibly introspective. I think that's the way I'm gonna define it now, or identify it now. I definitely said this was gonna be my niche. I was just gonna find a guy that was gonna take care of me and I was gonna be set. But I didn't know because no one told me. The people that I knew that didn't work, but they had nice things. They didn't really tell me like the intricate details of everything you needed to do for these nice things. So I just thought like you just had to smile and you were going to be set. But no.
Yeah, 15-year-old brain.
Yeah. And I had this, not to be like crass, but for lack of like a better term, I wanted to be like, I also felt like your body was like a temple and sacred, and I wanted to be a virgin until I got married. So it contradicts, like it wasn't going to work out. Like I realized that
you can't seduce boys and also like be pure that way at the same time. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it doesn't. No one told me. And I realized this when I was about 18 and I had a little boyfriend, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to have sex. So probably this is not going to work. Now what am I going to do? So then I was really depressed because then now I had no plan.
Your plan B, it turned out the way you thought it was going to turn out. So now you're like, fuck, what am I supposed to do now?
Yeah, now I really had to like think things through. And I remember my senior year, to graduate in New York City, you have to have 44 credits and you have to pass 5 state exams, 5 regents. In my senior year, I was 18, pushing 19 because I was significantly behind. And I only had 17 credits and I only had 1 regent. So that means it was no way I was going to pass. And then remember, when you turn 21, they push you out of high school. So now I'm just screwed because I'm like 19. And I tried to get into an alternative to high school, but you had to take an entrance exam, and I failed the test. The alternative to high school would have allowed me to get credits fast. It was like a credit recovery high school, but that didn't work. I failed. And so then I ran out of plans. So I went to my AP, and even though I didn't go to school.
AP, what's the AP?
Oh, my assistant principal. Okay. I went to his office to see if I could get a pamphlet for a GED program. And I didn't go to school often, but when I would go, I was pretty nice but by the time I got to high school, I calmed down with like the fighting and it was like a new slate. So when I never really had super negative energy with any of my teachers or anything like that. Well, some of them, but not all. And so when I went to the AP and I said, hey, Mr. Combs, can you give me the pamphlet because I'm going to just drop out. I'm going to just do my GED. He said to me, Starasia, I don't want you to do that. He had watched some of my other siblings, fall through the cracks. And he said, it doesn't matter when a teacher failed you. Or for now, I would say when I failed myself. But he said, it doesn't matter when a teacher failed you. He or she can always go back and overturn a grade. And I remember looking back at that journal. And like, he gives me the information. I'm writing in the journal. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to go talk to the teachers. And I'm just going to tell them the truth. And I went to all of the teachers that I failed. And the truth was that, it wasn't that I didn't want to do schoolwork, or it wasn't that I didn't care. It was that it hurt me too much to like, whenever I did try, I didn't perform well because I just didn't, I don't know. And I felt like, I was just insecure about education. I just felt like I couldn't do it. And that's why I didn't try. And I really did think that like, yeah, I told them the truth. And fortunately for me, every single teacher that I did poorly in their course, they allowed me to do these credit recovery packets. They referred to them as like ICU packets. So it's a year worth of work. And once you submit it, they'll give you the credit. So, and they also allowed me to go to PM school and AM school. With AM school at 6 o'clock in the morning, regular school from 8 to 3, and then PM school from like 3:30 to 5:30. So I was in school all day.
You was in school from 6 in the morning to 5:30.
Yes. And then me and my parents had a little bit of a, girls with their moms, we had a little bit of tension. And so I wasn't depending on them for anything financially at that time. So I ended up getting a job, and I couldn't tell my job that I was in high school because it was embarrassing, and none of the other girls were in high school. And so fortunately for me, I was able to make up 25 credits in the 5 regents, and I graduated high school on time for the time that I got there.
Wow. That is amazing.
That is
and all
amazing.
because that assistant principal was like,
principal. Do you keep in contact with him too?
No, but I wish I could find him because he really did.
What's his name? Let's get him a shout out on his show, and somebody know him. They can scream him out and be like, "Yeah."
His name is Mr. Combs, but I have to find the first name because I felt like he could have easily gave
What
me
school?
the
What high
answer.
school?
I went to Andrew Jackson.
So anybody who know Mr. Combs from Andrew Jackson, tell him he saved Star Life. Mr. Jones, cheers to you.
Yes, cheers to Mr.
Yes.
Combs for sure.
Perfect time for a cheers. I love that.
Combs.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Phoenix and I have mentioned this before. Phoenix and I both have our GEDs because it's interesting listening to you tell this story because it's, and I want to hear your perspective on this as we move forward into learning more about you and your experience, especially as a teacher. It's almost as if school is set up in a way in which you are not allowed to fail to learn or learn through failure. And when you do fail, it just becomes this downward spiral. Like you said, you were put in these lower classes and, with people who were worse off than you, and it kind of drug you down. And then the teachers who are kind of against you. And it just becomes this huge uphill battle, more so than it should have been, just because of that one class failure, that one bad grade or what have you.
Why aren't teachers catching things before it gets to the point of just straight failure? So you telling me that, like Star said, she waited till she took this test, and then when she took this test, she found out she wasn't going to the next grade. Well, they didn't know that she wasn't prepared for the test prior to taking the test. Like, why are we getting to the point of failure to where we're saying, you know what, you failed, now you got to start over? That's like a blow to the chest, right?
Yeah, and I feel like the pipe to prison. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar. Are you guys familiar with the pipe to prison? I watched.
Yes, but please explain.
No, yeah, what is that? I haven't heard of it.
So I watched a documentary. I don't want to misspeak because it's been some time, but there's 2 documentaries that discuss the pipe to prison. And they have a great visual that helps you to understand it better. But the film is one is Waiting for Superman, which talks about like lottery and inequality in education. And then there's another documentary, 13, on Netflix, directed by, I believe, Ava DuVernay, if I'm that's who I believe created the documentary. But basically, it talks about how they track like I want to say the government or the prison system. I want to say the prison system. They track students from even elementary school. They watch and track your performance in elementary school, and they create beds based on students' performance. So in the visual, it's
that's the analytics they use to determine how many beds and how many prisons are needed. And that is a real thing?
It is. And the visual, it shows you like you see that like you'll track the kids, you'll see like first grade, second grade, third grade. When it's time for them to get to those standardized tests, right? You'll see students drop. So when you drop, that's a bed. And the further that they go into their education, they drop, that's another bed. So they're designing these prisons, right? And creating beds for students based off of their academic performance from children.
Which is messed up that they're planning for them to enter the prison system rather than anticipating this and then finding a way to help them away from that.
Yeah, no intervention at all.
No. So I'm going to continue into how you turned your education experience into now being on the other side of that and being a teacher. Before we move into that, I'd like to pause here for a minute because we have brought up the idea of the standardized testing quite frequently. And it sounds like that affected you pretty heavily throughout the grades that you went through. Can you speak to, especially as an educator, your opinion about standardized tests, how they fit in, the pros and cons? Because I know there's a lot of controversy around them.
So I think that first I want to point out that in terms of standardized testing, it's very different from when like we were younger. Remember before when we took standardized tests, they were timed, right? So you had this small window to complete this test. So you're looking at the test, you're looking at the clock. Whereas now for standardized testing, there is no, you have all day. And if you don't finish in this day, then you can finish tomorrow, right? You have like a week, essentially, which is great. So making, taking away that time limit, right? I like that. So I feel like it takes off of some of the anxiety. It allows students to organize their ideas, right? But I think that standardized testing, I think that it's a catch-22 because I feel like it helps in that it allows you to assess what students have learned throughout the year. It helps to assess if the teachers are educating students effectively. It holds us accountable. It's a way to track, how the school's doing. As if you have a massive group of students who are performing low on these standardized tests, then we need to look at these teachers and we need to figure out if we have to do some type of professional development to, prepare them. You know what I mean? So I like standardized testing for that. But I think that in the past, there has been criticisms of these exams because they say that some of them have like racial biases. So the way that
I heard that with the LSAT and the MCAT and the GMAT, like all the standardized college exams as well, like the professional exams.
Even to be a teacher, we had an exam, the ATSW, to get your certification in New York City. Yeah. And they had to do away with that exam, I want to say 2 years ago, because they found that there was some racial bias. So a lot of students that paid for that exam and took it and studied for it, or failed, some of them failed. It's like we weren't starting at an even playing field. So in terms of standardized testing for students, I do think that students need to be assessed. Mm-hmm. I just think that the tests need to be I feel like they need to be a little bit more culturally relevant. I feel like in terms of like the jargon, it can be overwhelming for students, right? Specifically.
Why is that though?
Why? Is
the jargon or the questions or the language in the questions overwhelming or unfamiliar?
I think that it can be overwhelming or unfamiliar because there isn't equity and equality in education. So like the way that, for example, students are being taught in Flushing isn't the same way that students are being taught in Jamaica, Queens. We don't have the same access and resources, but yet you're holding these students to the same standard. And that's why there's certain groups or certain communities that are not performing.
The curriculum for the city or the state of New York is not the same across the board. Like everybody doesn't supposed to know this level of English or this level of math or this many vocabulary words. Like that's not a standard across the masses.
So for New York City, we all do follow Common Core standards, Common Core state standards. They're introducing a new set of standards in the fall of 2021, which I'm excited about. We'll see how that goes. But even if we're all held to, or even if we're all supposed to educate using the same standards, we still don't have the same resources, right? We still don't have an adequate amount of teachers, right? Sometimes these classes are overwhelmed, or these teachers are overwhelmed with 32 students, and then you don't have enough computers, or sometimes you may not have enough books, right? So I feel like although, yes, we're all supposed to teach the same standards, we don't all have access to the same information. Am I making sense?
Yeah. What it sounds like is it almost sounds like you're saying that the education is not meeting the teachers and the children where they're at. It's expecting them to be somewhere they're not and then to reach the next level when they're not even here at this first level yet. This might be a left field question, but I am curious about, do you think that current day segregation and gentrification has anything to do with how education is being impacted right now? Do you think that there's any correlation between kind of how the schools are being run and that education gap that we're seeing and current day segregation?
So I'm not really 100. I want to provide an example to maybe answer your question, and you can, ask if I'm not making sense. You can let me know. How many are you guys familiar with what do we call it? Specialized exams for high schools?
I am not.
So
No.
in New York City, you can take these specialized high school tests, right? And in a neighborhood, we talked about this in one of my college courses last semester. In a neighborhood like Flushing, the middle school students, they're prepped for these specialized high school exams. So the school offers free tutoring and, test prep, and the students are made aware of these exams, right? And if there's any type of if students have to pay for these exams, whatever it is that these students need to know in certain communities, they know. Specialized high schools can put you in a position, right? If you go to a specialized high school, you may be in a high school where you essentially graduate the high school with.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about like Brooklyn Tech and like Bronx Science and schools like that.
Yeah, so there's so many specialized, there are so many high schools that can really allow these students to walk away with certain skills, right? I had a friend, Kimberly, who graduated high school with her associate's degree.
Oh.
Because she went to a high school that allowed her to take college courses, right? Mm-hmm. But in poor communities or communities where parents are financially stressed or their social economic status is, low social economic status, their children are not aware of these specialized high school exams. They're not offered tutoring, and they don't have as much access. So I think that the neighborhood that you're in, and I think the neighborhood that you're in, and your family's economic background dictate the equity in education. I don't feel like it's equal for all.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, so I guess I got a question based off Gina's question. So Gina mentioned gentrification. So gentrification style would be like the Bedford-Stuyvesants. You know how Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, when I was growing up, we called it the old Brooklyn, like the Wild Wild West, right?
Yeah.
And now Brooklyn doesn't look like that. You have like hippies and young professionals, and it's more diverse than it ever been. Now with the influx and the integration of this new generation moving into the old Brooklyn, how is that affecting education? Because now you have kids from those quote unquote good neighborhoods moving into the inner city, going to schools with kids that's from like that was from low socioeconomic status. What's that education dynamic like?
I'm not really sure in terms of how gentrification is affecting education. Okay. I haven't witnessed it like firsthand, but I will say that I know that when schools are performing poorly, right, when the neighborhood starts to change, that's when we see changes in the school. So, for example, have you ever, my high school, I went to Andrew Jackson, but because the school was performing poorly, they then closed Andrew Jackson, and then they had, yes. So I think that may be something that will be done. Like you come in and you get a new principal, you clean it up a bit. You rename the school, you make the standards for getting into the school a little bit challenging, so that way you shift the school with the neighborhood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So answer this question for me. What's the purpose in taking one high school, so like Andrew Jackson, that was one high school, and turning into 3 different high schools? how does that change the dynamics and change the trajectory of the students and move them to more of a positive twist rather than what it was prior to the change?
I'm not too sure about that question. How does it change the trajectory? I'm interested to know that myself, to be honest.
Yeah, like what's the purpose? I never understood that, why they go to Andrew Jackson and turn Andrew Jackson into 3 schools, and why would 3 schools be better than that one high school? Like, how did that change the way that the students perform?
Well, you know what I think it is, though? And this is my personal opinion, I would say that what happens is you have to do something about these schools that are performing poorly, right? If you close the school down, then where will all the students go? We can't do that. So we can brand it differently, and we can, try to have sub schools and see if that would shift. You get what I'm saying? So like,
the same curriculum, the same students,
and the same teachers.
Yeah.
It's the same teachers. So that it just, I feel like it's just a strategy to save face, right? Or a strategy to make it appear as if something, action is being taken. We're working, because in education, specifically with like tenured teachers, it's very hard. Once you're a tenured teacher, that essentially.
What is that for our audience, so they know that?
So the goal is to become a tenured teacher or a tenured educator, because once you get tenured, that means that your job is essentially secure. So it's incredible. Even if your students are performing poorly, right? Your principal can't just come and fire you because your students are not performing well. There's a slew of things, or a lot of things that a principal will have to do. For example, they have to show that they've given you a coach. They've included professional development in your schedule, and you had a mentor. And there's so many things that tenured teachers never lose their job unless you've committed if you get arrested or you commit a crime and you're found guilty, right? And even if you were to, for example, I hope no one does this, but an example would be, I once knew someone who they were charged with or they were being accused of domestic battery. And this was a tenured teacher. So no, because this teacher had gotten arrested, no, they couldn't come back into the actual school building. They had to go to a different building and maybe grade some exams but they still received their entire pay. So no action is taken. When teachers are, there are some teachers that are in it because they actually love students, but then there are other teachers who, after some time, maybe they lose, they lose that passion, or they lose the desire to do it. I don't really know, but it's hard to get those teachers out. You essentially can't.
Gotcha. So talking about passion, when did you develop, or when did you get that passion to say, you know what, this is what I want to be. I want to go back into the school system and change lives, like my old AP changed mine. Like my old AP changed mine.
Yeah. What made me want to go into teaching was I thought about all of the teachers that really went the extra mile for me. And some of them, to be quite honest, I didn't deserve their compassion, and they embodied what a true educator, was, because when I went to them and I was honest and I asked for their help, teachers that I was disrespectful to, they helped me. They tutored me. They cheered me on. They wanted to see me do well. And I felt like it was, I wanted to teach to do that for someone else. Like, it was my goal to pay it forward. And I wanted to help students that were like me. I felt that I was fortunate that not everyone counted me out, and that changed the trajectory of my life ultimately. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely wanted to do that for other students, specifically students who struggled like me. I love all children, all kids, but it's something that, because I don't like for anyone to be the underdog, but I just love to see students, when they struggle, I love to be able to find a way to help them soar, whether it be cater, even though I have standards that I have to follow. Like, I had a student once, my very first year teaching, named Justin, and he was like the popular kid, but he was a little jerk. And something told me that if I got Justin, because everyone followed him, that then I would, if I could get him, then I could get everyone. And I said to myself, what could I do to make this kid care about this? Teaching English, sometimes it can be incredibly boring. So I said to myself, like, what could I do to get him to care or to get his attention? Or, his grades wasn't that great. And I remember listening to him talk to one of his friends about basketball. And so I decided to do a lesson on inferencing, and I put up flu games, Michael Jordan's flu games. I put up a picture of Michael Jordan, the image, and I said, does anyone know what this is? Are you familiar? And then I got Justin. And then from there, we just took off. So I love to find a way to meet the needs of diverse learners, because I feel like I wish that someone would have done that for me, specifically in those early ages of adolescence.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And I know you said that you have always been very spiritual, and that I'm a self-proclaimed agnostic myself, but there are parables within the Bible that I appreciate. And what you just said reminds me of, when Jesus was talking about the sheep, and if you have 99 sheep and one of them goes astray, like, you leave and you go to help that one. Like, that one is the one that needs your help the most. And that sounds exactly like what you're doing is, you love all of your students, but it's the ones that really need your help that you're like, I can impact that kid. And how do I do it? And you're using your creativity and your experience to reach those children. And that just that hits me right here. That's absolutely beautiful. And I love that you are dedicating your life to doing that.
Thank you. At first, I was a bit insecure. My first couple of years teaching, I felt like I didn't fit in, and I wasn't necessarily I definitely didn't fit in. And because of my own academic journey, I was a little bit insecure in terms of what I had to offer. Because like I said, I'm not like a lot of my coworkers. Even when we have these clashes, for example, I'm like an advocate for bridging learning gaps and not leaving these students back, especially when there's a study. I don't remember who conducted it, but they say that as a part of your psychological development, or that I believe that the virtue that you're supposed to obtain when you're from 7 to 11 is competency versus inferiority, right? So when we're leaving students back, specifically when they're incredibly young, for me, it was first grade, sixth grade, that creates a level of trauma. And then you always it takes work to not second guess if you are capable enough, because you've learned during those early stages of your psychological development that you are inferior. So for me, when I'm at work, sometimes, not all the time, I'll have these moments where, specifically at the end of the year, where I'm advocating not to hold these kids back. And my coworkers will be like, we know, Jones, you got look back. Everybody's not you. But I get so upset because it's nah, we got to figure out something else.
How did that make you feel when they said that to you? Everybody's not you, because in your mind, you everybody is me. And if I could be helped, then we can help them as well. Do you feel like that?
I feel like, to me, I feel like they're speaking from a place of, I don't want to say a place of ignorance, but there's something very humbling that happens when you've experienced something firsthand, right? So for me, I feel like I'm in a unique position as an educator because I was once the failing student. My mother was once the mother that teachers talked about, that said, oh, you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but then I'm also an educator now. So I feel like I'm looking at things from a unique perspective. And I try not to fault my coworkers when they say, everybody's not you. They don't know what it feels like to feel like For me, I remember getting spelling tests on Friday and acting like I was asleep because those 40s killed my spirit every time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I just try to come from a place of understanding always, because getting frustrated, it doesn't, I don't always, sometimes I have gotten frustrated, but for the most part, I just understand that it's lack of being in that situation themselves.
And was college difficult? Like when you went to undergrad, was that as difficult as like middle school and high school?
College was exciting. It was difficult for me in terms of the college experience was difficult for me because I moved out of my parents' house when I was actually still in high school. I didn't finish yet. It was my senior year, and I feel like removing myself from that environment also contributed to me graduating. It gave me a level of like clarity that I needed, and as I said, at the time, none of my siblings nor my parents or anyone had completed high school, had a high school diploma. So maybe they didn't understand how important it was to me. So when I got into college, what made it challenging was, of course, there was a lot of learning gaps that had to, a lot of foundational skills that I didn't really have because I was performing poorly, up until about 12th grade. So learning how to structure a paper, to be honest, even when I look at the way that my teachers taught me, I was unfamiliar of the different types of writing, like narrative and informative writing. And you know what I mean? I was not aware. So that was challenging, having to develop those foundational skills. And then what also made college challenging was that I was relatively young and I had adult responsibilities in addition to going to college full time. I had rent, and it was just an overwhelming time. But I feel like it definitely built resilience because, completing high school, I always say I have a couple of degrees now. And I feel like nothing matters more to me than my high school diploma. I cherish that the most. I have a senior t-shirt. It should say super, super behind it, but I have a senior t-shirt that I wear still now, 10 years later. That means so much to me because that allowed me to know that, like, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And if you fall down, it's okay. Like, you're going to be all right. Just get up.
I love that so much. I want to just bring attention to that phrase that you just used. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. That's so powerful. I want to ask also, because kind of through this story, even beyond even beyond just education and book smarts and things, a hidden theme that I feel like I'm picking up from the story that you're telling is also mental health, like this self-talk that you had, the bullying that you experienced, all of this negativity. What is your take on that? And do you think that mental health has a part to play in public education now?
Yes, mental health definitely has a part to, I'm going to start with the back end. Mental health definitely has a place in public education now. We do, as a part of our curriculum, our school curriculum, and we have to do social emotional learning. So one of my classes that I have to teach, in addition to teaching ELA, is they call it foundations, but it's social emotional learning, where we talk about the importance of making decisions, the impact of our words. We do restorative circles, and they're really big on, building students' self-esteem. I see that in the curriculum now. We have at the school that I work at is amazing. My administrators are the best. We do a PS I Love You Day, where it's like this big seminar where we learn a lot about mental health and what to do and paying attention to your body and how you're feeling and what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. So I really love that. We didn't have that when I was in school. And in terms of self-talk, I feel like, especially now that I'm older, I didn't realize back then when I was struggling in like college and my early academic career that it's imperative that you speak life over things, right? So, right, in moments where you're, and that's also in the Bible, right? So in moments where you're feeling self-doubt, I feel like soon as a negative thought enters your mind, you have to tackle that with a positive thought and keep your mind fixated on the positive thoughts, right? Input, positive input. I think for me, I was definitely, I think that I wanted so bad, especially because I feel like I've always been, I talk a lot and I love talking, but I also listen and I observe and I watch and I try my best. I feel like God allows me to see certain things so that so that way I feel like the most unfortunate thing ever would have been for me to, I'm sure my mom loves all of her children and my parents, they love their children, but I felt like it would have been such a disservice and so unfortunate for me not to have learned from my mom's mistakes, right? I yearned for a sense of like stability in terms of emotional stability, financial stability. I didn't really grow up with that. And I knew that education was a part of me, acquiring that stability that I yearned for. So even when I was in college and I was really struggling, it would be times where I would get my syllabus and I would cry because I couldn't afford those books and rent. And I would see people eating and I would be starving. And I had to get a vending machine snacks and they had like salad and Starbucks. It was amazing. And I wanted some, but I raised my hand like, Professor, I thought you said we couldn't eat in class. Just because I didn't have the money. I didn't have any. But I remembered that like, when you were in high school, like, because God allowed me to fix such a horrible mistake. I was so grateful that it made me want to persevere. I wanted that stability so much. It was like sink or swim, and I was in survival mode. And I kept telling myself that. So I think it helps.
Yeah, it's almost like you saw it as a second chance, an opportunity to move forward and try again. And I love that you've taken that experience and you've turned that around into helping other people and identifying the struggles, and not just identifying, but empathizing with the struggles that they experience as well. So with that, your story is absolutely amazing. And I want to know what's next for you. I know that we're kind of coming out of a pandemic here, and teaching through COVID I can't imagine you probably have stories about that. So kind of moving forward, what do you think comes next for you?
What comes next for me, I'm super excited about the future, actually. So I've had the pleasure of being able to be in the classroom for about 4.5 years. And as I mentioned initially, I wanted to go into education because I wanted to help students that looked like me. But in being in the classroom, I learned that the impact that I want to make, I cannot do that in the classroom. So I'm going to go back to school in the fall for a leadership degree. And it's my goal I'm either going to do a leadership degree or I'm going to get an additional master's or a doctorate in urban policy. So that way I can focus on education reform. And when I say reform, I want to find a way to be an educational advocate where I'm helping to bridge learning gaps versus labeling students and doing that pipe to prison thing. I want to find a way to be a part of the change. So
contribute to work on policies.
Yes, educational policy for sure. I'm nervous because I feel like I'm still stepping into my greatness and finding my voice and being confident and being passionate about this issue. As I mentioned in the past, when my coworkers would be like, everybody's not you, Jones, I would like retreat. Whereas now I'm learning that, if I'm passionate about this, it's not okay for me to retreat. Like, I'm speaking on behalf of, me being that young girl falling, who could have fallen through the cracks, and I'm trying to help other people. So leadership and education and making those long lasting changes is what I'm looking to do.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds powerful. And we definitely are behind you in that admirable and lofty goal, and I believe that you can make it. So if there's anything that we can do as life coaches or just as friends to support you in that, please let us know, because that is absolutely important, not just for yourself, but obviously the people whose lives you are definitely changing.
Thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
I feel the same way.
I agree. I definitely enjoy having you on the show today, and you telling us your amazing story. It was uplifting and very inspirational. So thank you, Star.
You're welcome.
But before you go, this is my favorite part of the show. This is called our Thing of the Week. Our Thing of the Week is where Gina and I provide our audience with something to hold on to until we see them or hear, so they see or hear us again. So without further ado, my Thing of the Week is this. My Thing of the Week is simple. Don't forget the Titans. Remember that movie, Remember the Titans? I challenge the audience to do the same. Not forget the Titans. Remember the Titans. What do that mean? That means whatever you go through today, tomorrow, the next week, is not the worst thing you ever been through. Think about it. If you close your eyes and remember a time, there was a time long ago that you went through another moment that you thought you wasn't going to get out of, but you did. So I'm here to tell you would get out of this one as well. Remember the Titans. Coach Phoenix, role model mindset. Coach Gina.
I love that. I think as humans, we tend to forget all of the mountains that we've traversed and all of the things that we've overcome. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. We just move on to the next thing so quickly. So I love that, to just take a moment, pause, and just remember how amazing you really are.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that, Phoenix. I always love your Thing of the Week. So my Thing of the Week is, upon hearing Star's story and thinking about the self-talk that we all use against ourselves, the negative self-talk, that voice that we have in our head, I challenge you, listeners and viewers, for the coming week, when you find yourself saying, I can't, complete that sentence with yet, right? I can't drive yet. I can't get that promotion yet. I don't know how to read. I'm thinking about my 2-year-old. I don't know how to read yet. You will, you can, if you just keep trying.
And I like that a lot. And that goes into something Star mentioned earlier about manifesting it. So if you say, I can drive, and you say yet, and you keep telling yourself, like, I am going to drive, and sooner or later, that's going to come into fruition. So I love that.
Yeah.
Star, thank you so much for joining us. Audience, thank you so much again for joining us yet for another week of Perspective. Coach Gina, Coach Phoenix, Toast with the Coaches, and we out. Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.